Part of today's event is to give out UNH's annual Social Innovator of the Year Award. UNH's annual Social Innovator of the Year Award recognizes a leader with a demonstrated commitment to combining the passion and purpose of a social or environmental mission with the rigor and accountability of a financially sustainable, scalable model for change. We are delighted to celebrate the 6th anniversary of this very prestigious award and to introduce as today's keynote speaker, Marina Kim, co-founder and executive director of Ashoka U. It's no exaggeration to say that Marina is helping rewire college education to enable, empower, and catalyze changemakers.
Marina, who holds a BA in International Relations from Stanford University, has been working in social innovation for over 15 years. Among her many honors, Marina was named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 for social entrepreneurship. She works for Ashoka, a global nonprofit which was founded on the idea that the most powerful force for good in the world is a social entrepreneur, a person driven by an innovative idea that can help correct an entrenched global problem. Marina co-founded and leads Ashoka U, a division of Ashoka which has worked with over 400 colleges and universities globally to help them embed social innovation across the campus to support student changemakers. It's especially exciting for us to be able to honor today a person who has played a huge role in supporting universities like UNH who want to offer changemaker education to students like Vincent and I and so many others. Please join us in welcoming Marina Kim to the stage. Please also welcome Executive Director of the Center for Social Innovation and Enterprise, Fiona Wilson, who will join us in presenting Marina Kim with this prestigious award.
So, as you heard, Marina is a true visionary and an inspiration to so many of us, like myself and others who are trying to embed changemaker education across universities around the world. This couldn't be more fitting in some ways because Marina, as you'll hear in her keynote today, started her journey as a changemaker while she was at Stanford University, just like Jill and Vincent. And she really started Ashoka U on graduating from university. So she's a great role model for showing our students that you can create amazing change while you're in university and in the years right after you graduate. It's not something you have to wait for and do later in your career. So Marina, we couldn't be more thrilled to have you here today. We couldn't be more honored to be able to give you this award. You're a huge inspiration to me and I know to so many of my colleagues, so thank you.
Okay, so I just love being on college campuses, and no matter how old I get, I still always feel like a student. So I just feel completely at home here, and I've also just spent the morning listening to the student final presentations, and I was blown away by the quality. Everyone was way smarter than I was when I was in college. So I'm glad to see that the world is on track. I basically started, as Fiona mentioned, in the same place as many students when they come to college. My college application was how I wanted to do something to make a difference in the world. I had no idea what it was, but that's exactly why I wanted to go to college, because it would help me figure everything out. Not only what I major in, but also what I would do after graduation. And so that's a lot of pressure on a few years to figure everything out for the rest of your life. And that's what the pressure I felt. And the declaration of a major just felt like the biggest decision in my life that would affect every future decision I would ever take. But it was also this just exciting moment of trying on lots of different identities of, could I be this major? Could I be that major? I think I considered at least 18 majors before I decided on the one that I was closest to graduating with by the time they forced me to declare. So I really feel that it was just part of this exploration. And for me, when I was on this very meandering, exciting, overwhelming, chaotic learning journey, I had a few moments of awakening. And that was when I saw a social entrepreneur come to campus and talk about what they were doing in the world, the fact that they could actually have a job where they felt excited to get out of bed. And yes, it was hard, but it was meaningful. They were actually doing something. They weren't just pushing papers leaders. They weren't just cogs in a wheel of who knows what wheel going in what direction. They really felt a sense that they were contributing and that they were doing something important for the world, and it aligned with their own passion and purpose. And I think that, if a campus can do that for a large number of students, that's a huge gift. And I think a lot of the questions around what will you do with the rest of your life figure themselves out if you kind of get on the right path with inspiration. Post-graduation, after a lot of student activities in college, I ended up at Ashoka. And so it was an amazing place to continue my journey. And Ashoka is one of the earliest organizations that supported the field of social entrepreneurship. They went around looking for crazy people from within communities who had a deep understanding of what the problems were, but also had an instinct about what could be useful to move the needle in a positive direction. And so Ashoka started in India, Indonesia, Mexico. It was a lot of different places around the world. And the key insight was it's people from within the communities that actually have the answers. And Ashoka really is about identifying and enabling those people to create change in their own context. And that they had to have a big idea that they would be willing to work for many, many years on, because social change is hard and you can't just fix an entire system in a year and a half or a semester. And so that was just a place where I continued my own learning as an ongoing student, but outside of college in the confines of Ashoka. And as part of what you learn at Ashoka, there's this deep belief that everyone both is and has potential to be a change maker. So not everyone has to become an Ashoka Fellow, not everyone has to become a social entrepreneur, not everyone is wired to be a founder, nor should they. But everyone can see a problem and do something about it and feel like they're contributing and actually make a meaningful difference in their family, in their community, in their school, in their whatever corporate job that they might be in, that's something that everyone can do. And really the starting point is being able to practice it, just like a language and just like sports. You don't start being able to lift, 100 pounds dumbbells. You actually have to start with smaller weights. It's exactly the same philosophy with change making. Start somewhere, start small, practice, and do it. So I love with these idea competitions, it's actually a great way to have both an exciting opportunity to practice thinking like a change maker, and in many cases actually doing something, whether it's a pilot or you're launching it officially. That is by far the best way to be an amazing change maker, is to just do it, but do it thoughtfully and intentionally and consistently. And at the same time, when I was at Ashoka, I did get to be exposed to a lot of Ashoka Fellows. So these are actually some of the United States Ashoka Fellows. And one of the things that in trying to understand the relationship between social entrepreneurship and change making, one of the patterns that came out was that social entrepreneurs, and again, if you're an educational entrepreneur, usually they worked as a teacher within the system to understand what's not working so that they could come up with an idea for how that system could be better. They would then rethink the system, rewire how it could be more empowering for more people to be change makers. So if it's an educator, how do you rethink it so that in your classroom, students have more ownership? And the same goes for all the other industries. So I got to practice my own continuing education as both a change maker and a social entrepreneur a few years into my time at Ashoka. I'd been hired as a junior staff member in the university initiative, and I didn't fully appreciate the strategy, and so for the first few years, I actually got a deep dive into all the existing university networks that we were working with at the time. I didn't think we were actually doing enough to change the actual structures within higher ed. We were just focused on adding more courses or adding another research project. And so I was on the verge of quitting about 3 years into Ashoka. And right before I quit, my boss quit to start another organization. And so I was given the opportunity within Ashoka to say, you have 1 year runway. You get to be an entrepreneur. You've been complaining, so do something about it. What would you do? And so actually, that was really scary. I was terrified. I didn't actually think they would ever give me that opportunity. But I was given the mandate by the founder of Ashoka to say, okay, try this. Do it better. Actually, you have to completely fundraise your own money and be financially sustainable. And you have to have systemic change. You can't just do, one by one social change. So that became the beginning of my actual entrepreneurial journey. It's one thing to learn about it. It's one thing to, practice it in a classroom and do projects. But then this was the really scary part. 10 years later, it's still going, but it's been a lot of learning along the way. But really it started because I had been a student and I had experienced quite a transformational opportunity to discover my own potential to lead change. And then I was just wondering, how do we get many hundreds and thousands of universities around the world to have that opportunity for students? And so a lot of the beginning questions came from my own experience as a student, which actually gave me the authenticity to even think I could have anything to do with change in higher ed. And then in the process, there was a lot of learning and a lot of adaptation with the model. But it just so happens that there was a time, like a ripe timing. So we launched Ashoka U in the fall of 2008. For those of you who remember, we actually launched 2 weeks before the economic crisis hit, and we happened to get the first 4 university partners to sign on with a financial commitment that was our seed capital, and we got the money 2 weeks before all their universities put a financial freeze. So if we had waited a few more weeks, we wouldn't have even gotten off the ground. And so it was just this interesting moment of timing, but then we launched Ashoka U in the middle of an economic crisis, and we had to figure out how to be financially viable. So that was just an exciting challenge. But I think what we also hit is just a moment where colleges and universities, both because of the financial crisis, but also just because of changing employer demands and student demands, are being also asked these big questions of what do they keep evolving to be? And how do they keep being responsive to the economic need and the social desires of who they're serving? And so one of the things that was really exciting in terms of this ripeness factor is that the type of education we wanted to see more of and that we were hoping to support educators and support university leaders to have included a lot of skills and competencies that are actually very relevant for students graduating into a world that's also rapidly changing and very global and very dynamic. And so we were trying to think about how do we inspire more types of courses and co-curricular programs and just university-wide opportunities that would help students get skills and confidence in creativity, systems thinking, problem solving, collaboration, and empathy, all of which you need to be an entrepreneurial person, all of which you need to be a change maker, but it also happens to also be useful when you graduate and you're looking for a job. And so really the point of Ashoka U is to help ask universities, which comprises students, faculty, staff, and senior leaders, and community partners, but those are the people we work really closely with, just asking this question of how can you actually equip students to be change makers? And in that process, what we unlocked is that there's a lot of change that does need to happen in college campuses to be really effective at doing that. And if you think about what are the elements of what a changemaker education can be, how do you actually think about giving support and rewards for faculty across all the different disciplines? So it's not just students in a business school that see themselves as change makers, but how is this something that sociology and psychology and nursing and public health, like how are all of these different disciplines completely integrated and aligned? And so it starts to become a culture change process. It starts to be a question of how do you think about the system of higher ed, the system of how culture changes. And so what we're really trying to do is help realign the education to allow students to not only question their purpose, but think about it in an academic context, but think about it in the context of their entire life post-graduation, but then also develop this set of skill sets, mindsets, and identity that they can both practice change at a small scale, but also think about it post-graduation. But the crux of what we ended up falling into as the core Ashoka U secret sauce is that, courses are great, co-curricular programs are great, there's great models out there. That's not fundamentally different. What is different is how you actually get change to happen on a college campus. And the secret sauce has actually been that students are already excited to be change makers. They don't need any help. It's actually faculty and staff and other institutional leaders that need to be given support and permission and recognition and opportunity to actually innovate in their classroom, to innovate in their community partnerships, to feel like change makers themselves within their own research and teaching and service. And so we ended up working with really dynamic networks we have over 5,000 faculty, staff, senior leaders, and students that we've worked with thus far. And the vast majority of people that have been most transformed and transformational have been the faculty and staff and senior leaders. And so that's where we really focused on this question of how are we thinking about rewiring higher education, and how do I think about what Ashoka U is doing as if we were an Ashoka Fellow, where we have this amazing vision and ambition, but ultimately our success is a function of have we helped the systems and structures of higher education to enable more people to participate and be change makers, where that equally means many, 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 many students, but also means how the faculty and staff and senior leaders are also unlocked with their own innovations and opportunity to do that. And so just a few quick stories. We've worked with over 500 universities around the world. I'm lucky that being part of Ashoka means that I'm part of a global network. And so we have Ashoka Fellows around the world that we bring in as strategic partners to many of our campuses. We have Ashoka country offices around the world where there's country staff saying, we're seeing all these amazing trends in elementary, middle, and high school and colleges and universities. How do we become part of this network? And so ultimately, we foster a learning community and a network of resources, best practices, and partnership opportunities for anyone trying to develop new curricular programs, new co-curricular programs, new ways to think about how to attract students. But all of it is really about changing the student experience. But in the meantime, you have to also rethink the university purpose. So I've been lucky that I've had the past 10 years on this wonderful, wild journey with Ashoka U. All of it, honestly, I have to think back when times get hard. I always have to think back to when I was a student, because that's where my passion first came from, and where, the desire to help more students have more opportunities to figure out what they're going to do with their life in a meaningful and impactful way kind of came from my own personal experience. And so as I was coming here, I was thinking about what would I wish I had told myself right before I was graduating. And before I knew that Ashoka U was going to happen, before I knew both how hard it would be, but before I knew what I now know, which is both a pro and a con. Sometimes knowledge is actually hard for innovation. But the first of which is actually to think in systems. And that is, we were forced, because we're part of Ashoka, and systems level change is actually one of the core criteria, we were actually forced to go through a pretty rigorous process to identify what would become the core strategy of Ashoka U. So we had a whole summer, in the founding summer of Ashoka U. It was so much fun, like thousands of Post-it notes and lots of ideas. And we had 40 prototypes of ideas that turned into some hybrid of them that became the first core program of Ashoka U. But the first idea we thought was great at the time. But then when you actually get enough ideas, you learn that each idea has pros and cons, and that actually you have to keep pushing your thinking, because something that you're doing might actually have either unintended consequences, or it's just so much work that at the end of the day, you're not actually changing the structure of the system. You're just doing Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid, and that gets really tiring. And then the second one is actually that innovation isn't enough. I think I was a little overexcited by the power of launching something and starting something. And, the first few years of Ashoka was really hard, but it stayed just as hard every other year up until now. And it's actually that starting something is hard, but there's the momentum and the excitement and the adrenaline and the support from everyone because it's, just really exciting and you can go on passion. You have to keep iterating and innovating always. Things that you think will work when you get a new information or you get feedback from a partner, it doesn't actually work. And so you're constantly refining, redesigning, and just iterating. And so it's a never-ending process. It takes a lot of energy. So that brings me to my third point. It's all about team. So it's whether it's the core team that you're working with or the team of advisors and mentors that help pick you back up when you've fallen down or help question your thinking when you think you have all the answers, but really it's always more complicated. And so having people to both keep you humble, but also keep you going when it gets hard is really critical. And having people who just remind you that you can't do it alone. Because if you're actually making real change, it's not about you. And frankly, if it is about you, you're gonna burn out really quick and then you're not gonna make much change. So you have to think about the team that you're bringing with you, the formal team and the extended honor team that is there in spirit and in moral support. And that brings me to the last one, which is take the long view. When I started Ashoka U, I thought I would be maybe doing it 2 to 3 years and then we'd figure out what would happen next. I'm still here 10 years later. We're coming up with our 3-year plan for the next phase. There's still a lot of work to do when you're thinking about working with a system like higher education, which sometimes is slow to change. We try to find all the levers to make change go faster. But it really is like systemic change is a long process. But on the other hand, life is long, hopefully, very long. And so it's really about a journey. And so all of you who are either students or faculty or senior leaders or community members, like all of you are somewhere on your journey as a change maker. Again, one of the things that brings me the most joy with Ashoka U is working with educators and helping them feel like a change maker. And they're like, oh, I thought this was just for students, but now I feel like a change maker in my family and I have my child and we're doing this. And it's this amazing never ending process. And so you're both learning how to build your own confidence and identity of being able to do something about something that you might be frustrated with in the world. And it can be very, very small. And so just the kind of final pep talk is just start somewhere, keep going. But I think the real secret is that you have to keep trying to get better because starting things doesn't mean you're doing a good job. Picking one piece of a system without thinking through the unintended consequences can actually cause harm. And get smarter about how you're doing what you're doing because change is really hard. And so you have to be really smart and collaborative and just keep taking the long view. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. That was really inspiring. It's great to hear your journey, and all that advice is so helpful. I know for myself as a change maker, kind of always keeping that long view is something I'm going to try to always hold on to, and kind of always thinking back to these roots when I'm extremely inspired, especially when times make it tough trying to inspire change that sometimes does take a while.
So now we have about 10 minutes for an audience Q&A. We should have people in the back that have microphones, so if you want to just raise your hand and ask a question. Yes. Oh, we have a microphone coming right behind you.
I'm Nikki Galache, and I'm the faculty director of the Discovery Program, which is our broad general education program. And I think our students would find this extremely exciting as we think about updating our program. How can we incorporate in this kind of change? But what I've noticed as I listen to your wonderful, inspiring speech and as I go and listen to webinars at the AAU and W is that change is kind of an abstraction. And I would love to hear a couple of concrete examples. What have you funded? How do you cause universities to make change? How do you sponsor change? And I want like a real concrete example of some of the things you sponsor and do. So change is inspirational, but what are some of the projects?
I deliberately took out every slide that was very concrete because I was trying to be inspirational. So I'm glad that I was not concrete and I was inspirational. That's very good to hear. And so what we're trying to do is actually about helping people figure out for themselves what change means in their own institutional context. So on the one hand, it's going to be very frustrating because we don't have a prescriptive answer for every single university. We have a whole ecosystem database where we've mapped every single curricular innovation, co-curricular innovation, organizational operations, how are you living the values and putting it into your strategic plan. So if you want details, I can send you follow-up information with all of the crazy mapping of all the specific concrete things. But I would say we've worked very closely with universities that have been very ambitious in how they've done it. And so we have learning outcomes for folks that are looking at how to embed it into curriculum change, and it could be really interesting to think about how we might collaborate together afterwards. Then there's also a lot of the work that we've done to just convene communities of learning. And so what we try to do, because Ashoka, we're not an educator, we have never developed curriculum ourselves, we are not trying to sell any specific model to anyone. What we do, which is based on nearly 4 decades of what Ashoka has done, is we identify people with great ideas and models, and then we help bring some of the best ideas of specific educational models or specific curricular programs, and then bring them together so that people can learn from each other, and then problem solve and troubleshoot about, oh my gosh, how did you get this new program through all the academic committees, and how did you actually make change? And even if you rewire the learning outcomes, how do you actually help develop new pedagogical support for the faculty to actually teach in a more active, experiential way, which is also a key part of what we hope to see more of. So the frustrating thing is we have too many examples, so I actually don't want to do a disservice, but what we create is learning communities and lots of mapping of resources of example models that we find promising. But then the whole point is, you know your students, or you are a student and you know your fellow students and what you actually need. We want to give you a point of inspiration and then help you do what makes sense for your own institutional context. Please ask a hard question. And I can't answer all of them, but I will try. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a junior, and I was wondering that as a student, how can I demand change from my institution and kind of feel empowered to step off of traditional tracks presented?
Gosh. So I think our hope would be that in an ideal setting, you would be invited to offer your ideas and critique and constructive feedback, and that faculty would ask you how you can kind of co-lead your own learning journey in classrooms, and program staff would also be constantly getting feedback and ideas and help put some of your thinking into how they redesign programs as they happen, and that university deans and presidents and provosts would also in every strategic plan have a very open process to try to get the best ideas from the community, because you're the ones who actually have the education and experience it yourself, so you should be part of making it better and more relevant. So that would be the ideal. But in absence of that, I think what we've found is it's always about finding the people who are maybe inclined towards being a listening ear and a champion for student voices. So my guess is that you already have several faculty and several staff who seem to be good advocates. And so I would recommend doing that. But also I think it's finding other students. And I think there's value in just what we found when I was a student and we pushed through eventually a student-driven minor that became a minor in social innovation, a lot of what we struggled with in our own learning process was we didn't understand how the university worked, and that we didn't understand why it would take 2 years to get a new minor approved, which is actually pretty fast. That we were like, oh, I graduated by the time it got launched, so I was like very frustrated. But it was a very helpful learning experience because it often isn't that the university doesn't want to do ideas, it's just that how you balance the university systems of making policy decisions or budget allocations often has a very slow, very specific process. So I think it's the beauty is when you can find people who can help you navigate the university system and you actually have ideas that can be workable within those systems. So I don't know, I would love if you could just grab coffee with someone who could help explain how would an idea actually be possible, and actually where you would learn how to make something possible, but there'd be an openness to ideas. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I think it's as much about ideas being realistic and more people from the kind of budget strategy side wanting to welcome more input from students. Yeah, I don't know.
Hey, my name is Alex.
Hi.
I graduated from UNH 5 years ago. I started a nonprofit called the Post Landfill Action Network, and we work with about 250 campuses around the country on zero waste programs. I have a question for you. I could ask the question of Erin Krampitz. She's on our advisory council,
Yeah.
One of your co-founders. But I'll ask you because you're on stage. So a lot of what we do with campuses is we help them on their operations. We help students navigate the challenges of building better operations. So compost systems, on-campus thrift stores, and we deal with the departmental silo challenge all the time, right? Like, dining might have a compost program, but athletics doesn't. Dining manages composting, and so how do you get the program to be operationalized across campus? And there's so much energy from students, but then you have that challenge of the fact that everything is in these kind of specific systems, and dining says, well, we don't have funding to expand our collections to athletics, and athletics says, well, we don't have the funding to figure this out ourselves. So I'm wondering if you can share some examples or experiences of where you've been able to operationalize student energy through academics. So, system thinking, right? So why is there not the opportunity, or what would it look like to have students in an academic setting thinking through the ROI analysis of the implementation of campus-wide system change, right? And how do students get involved in the building of infrastructure at a campus system-wide level where the campus becomes the learning laboratory and the campus becomes the opportunity for students to look at the systems around them and go, we can change this, and we can work towards building, a better system, right? So I'm just curious if you have examples or stories or anecdotes on those types of experiences.
I mean, that's actually our dream, and that it isn't just students, but it's students working alongside faculty and staff, and where there's the ear of deans, VPs, president, and provost who are actually eagerly anticipating the recommendations and collaborating to make it work within the system and the budget constraints and the opportunities that they see. So we actually have lots of pieces of that. So I think that the goal is how do you make it truly systemic? And we've seen it happen at moments where there's strategic planning. So there's moments, and I think there's how do you leverage some of those strategic moments? So I think having new leadership, new president, new provost, where there's an opportunity to think about how do they get influenced in deciding their next phase of strategy and the legacy they want to leave? What is the role of students in informing them of that opportunity? So I think there's moments where you can have more influence for the systemic wide change. And then I think, I love seeing examples where a student has pushed really hard either for a course or a redesign of a course because the current model of a course just isn't working for them or it isn't good enough. And then the faculty was like, I don't know how to do it. Can you co-design it and co-lead it with me? And so I think it's I would love to see happening where I think what's exciting is the opportunity is when students have ideas and they're treated not just as criticizers, but actually that they're partners and collaborators. But as part of that, there's also a give and take of how do they work with the time. Timelines of universities can sometimes be frustratingly slow when you're a student from the timeline perspective. But if you could be willing to work within timelines of curriculum planning or the timelines of budgeting, but then you actually get a seat at the table and you get to co-create that. I would love to see more student kind of advisory committees, but where it goes beyond advising to actually like creative design committees. And so I think part of it is how can faculty think differently about how do they get the voices and perspectives and great ideas from students in how they're rethinking their centers, their programs, their curriculum, but then also, and the strategic planning at the more senior level, but then also how can students offer their services so that they're not just offering criticism, but they're offering solutions as well.
I want to not only see students on those councils, I want to see, the academic establishment of classes where students are encouraged to do the research that universities are engaged in already to figure out the better systems for the university, where it's not just like a student as part of a kind of, board system, but it's that the students are being taught how to manage a university and how to build system thinking into the structure of what's next for their master plan or for things like that.
Yeah. So again, I think that's even more ambitious than what we've seen because it is much more fully integrated. What I have seen is that at Tulane University, one of our close campus partners, they have a lot of these ideas and values as a core part of what they do. There's always room to improve. And so one of their courses, actually, I think it's their Design Thinking Social Innovation course, the students are scoped to think about their problem solution as their campus. And so they'll break off dining services and then do that, and the disability services, and actually partner where they get academic credit, but then they're partnering with the director of disability services or the director of dining services. And because it's they get a lot of faculty support to get the buy-in, and then they've actually affected budgets, programs, and strategy. And then that also gets filtered back up to senior leaders who are broadly supportive of this kind of thing on campus. And so again, I think part of it is that what is the structure? Because I think even students doing this work, it does take time, and it takes time and support to do it well. So ideally, you could get academic credit, you can have team support, you can kind of hear about what other people are doing within the same group that are each working on different issues, and that you can also learn how to be a good partner for key parts of campus.
Thank you.
I love this thinking. It's going to push my own thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for
Okay.
Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marina.